Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over some tips that I believe will make you a smarter Fortnite player. Despite the fact that these tips are going to be a tad bit situational, I think all of you guys watching this will be able to make good use of them. And I always really like these types of videos because the tips don't involve any kind of mechanical skill, and therefore they don't really take much practice to implement into your game. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first tip that we're going to cover in this video today is the importance of taking advantage of Fortnite's, let's just say, less than perfect game audio. Although the developers have tweaked the in-game audio many times in the past, and they'll probably do it many more times in the future as well, it simply isn't as good as it probably should be. Certain sounds such as weapons firing and structures being hit with a pickaxe are so loud most of the time that it really makes it difficult to hear anything else. On top of that, the sound of enemy footsteps specifically is probably the most broken aspect of sound in Fortnite because the location of the footsteps can be so difficult to pinpoint a lot of the time. And this is especially true in any situation where the enemy is either above or below you. Now, even though all of the bad things I just described can lead to some pretty frustrating deaths, if you know how to take advantage of the game audio in Fortnite, it can also lead to some very easy kills. Let me show you a perfect example of how this can be done in the form of a clip from the Fortnite World Cup, which obviously took place about a month ago.
300 IQ, using the sound of the slipstream. This is something he does so well. Crouching up, these players have no idea he's coming in. Finishes off the first one right away. That's for when Tux tries to make the play, but not before he finishes the elimination.
So as even the commentator pointed out, that right there was a perfect example of abusing the way sound works in Fortnite, and it was such a smart play in general. The first smart thing that Zate did there was take advantage of the crouch mechanic in Fortnite. It's such a simple thing, and obviously pretty much every single player on the planet will crouch multiple times in each game they play, but usually players crouch just to get a good angle or head glitch when they're on something like a ramp. But it's also a great way to make your footsteps almost impossible to hear, and not enough people take advantage of that. But the smartest thing that Zate did in that clip was use the other loud sounds around him as a way to totally mask the sound of him pushing. The commentator in the clip pointed out the sound of the slipstream nearby, but I think an even bigger factor was the sound of the weapon fire. One of the interesting things about weapons in Fortnite is that somewhat realistically, they don't all have the same sound level. Certain weapons like the suppressed and burst SMGs are much more quiet while being fired, compared to some of the other much louder weapons like the combat shotgun or heavy AR. So since one of the enemies that Zate was sneaking up on was fully auto-firing a heavy AR, he was able to pretty much perfectly time his movements with that player's shots, and when he eventually popped up, he totally had the element of surprise, which resulted in him getting a knock right away, and then finishing off the 1v2 fairly easily shortly after. And it's funny because if you didn't know that clip was from the Fortnite World Cup, it honestly just looks like a guy who was able to sneak up on two random players just because they were totally oblivious. But in reality, taking advantage of sound led to literally one of the top 50 duos on the entire planet being 1v2'd with ease. So anytime you plan on pushing a fight, or you're already in a fight and are expecting other players to push you, make sure to be aware of how certain sounds around you could play a role in that. If you or even your teammate is fully auto-firing a loud AR or a shotgun, it becomes super easy for enemies to sneak up on you, and at the same time, if you spot a player farming materials or doing anything else involving loud sound, they in all likelihood won't be able to hear your footsteps at all. The next tip I want to cover that'll make you a smarter Fortnite player is utilizing unexpected objects for cover and to get good angles in fights. One of the main ways that Fortnite is different from pretty much all the other popular shooter games out there, such as COD, Halo, and PUBG, is the fact that at any time you can build your own cover. In all of those other games, it's so important to find regular objects on the map that you can use to give you an advantage in gunfights. The most obvious example of this is in a game like Call of Duty. If you find something like a car or a window in a house, you can stand behind it and shoot at enemies perfectly normally. But to those same players, you're going to be very difficult to even see. And then, even when they do eventually locate you, a large portion of your body is going to be covered by whatever object you're behind. But in Fortnite, this really isn't as common or necessary because it's usually a much more effective strategy to just ramp rush an enemy or crank 90s and get high ground. But when used situationally, taking advantage of unexpected objects to either get cover or a good angle in a fight will really surprise your enemy and give you such an advantage. And I have a great example of this that I want to show you from my last gameplay.
Oh god.
In that situation, I was turtled up in a 1x1 and had what I believe was a full team of 4 enemies pushing me. Now I could have easily done what the majority of players probably would have and started cranking 90s or finding some other way to build to high ground. Obviously that isn't the worst idea in the world, but with 4 enemies all very near me, it would have been really difficult to pull that off. And even if I were to get high ground, keeping it with 4 different people pushing and shooting at you is another major challenge. So what I did instead was utilize a slightly odd piece of cover that was the result of a wall edit that had been made in the previous fight. I stayed totally silent while hiding behind it, and that basically baited one of the players to push in alone. He was obviously feeling really confident with 3 other teammates in the immediate area, but since he totally wasn't expecting me to be there, it resulted in me hitting a high damage pump shot that I had plenty of time to line up, and then immediately finishing him off with my SMG. From his point of view, he probably went from 200 health to 0 health without even realizing what had happened. And now I've turned that 1v4 into a significantly more manageable 1v3 without losing any health or using any of my materials. Using natural cover is something that I've noticed Nick Merck specifically is so good at, and I've really tried to implement it more into my own game. Moving on, the next aspect of being a smart Fortnite player I want to discuss is always understanding and evaluating the possible worst case scenario in the fights you get into. Here's the most simple and common example of what I mean by this. You're just playing normally when suddenly you spot an enemy looking towards you from a very far distance away, and then you decide to pull out your AR and start taking some shots at that player. And maybe you even end up hitting a few shots and taking 50 or 60 health from the player until he decides to disengage. However, you also need to realize that there's a somewhat decent chance that the enemy, or maybe even his teammate nearby, is carrying a heavy sniper and is going to blast you with it the second you start standing still to fire your AR. Another example of this same principle is anytime you spot a lone player in a town or just out in the open in duos or squads. The best case scenario here is that it truly is only one player and you, potentially with the help of your teammates, jump him and easily kill him. However, the worst case scenario is that you mindlessly push that one player because you believe he's alone, and then out of nowhere, his 1 to 3 teammates show up, and now you're stuck in a very difficult spot. To be a smart player in Fortnite, you need to be constantly evaluating the best and, more importantly, the worst case scenario of every single fight that you take, and also how likely both of those scenarios are. Because at the end of the day, not dying is always going to be more important than getting any single kill. So, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down in the comment section below. I want you guys to rate your own personal Fortnite IQ on a scale of 0 to 10. Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.